Um, I would like to take you as well from a women's empowerment, gender equality kind of organization of UNIFEM to my own organization, which is comprised of members of about 80 countries. We are a network of professional women, foresters, agronomists, livestock managers, fishery experts, etc. One of the things that we find is contributing to the problem is a gap between the women's empowerment kind of movement, women's movement, and the other side, which is a group of science and technology, rural, more agriculture and natural resource management. There's an enormous gap. Women that I work with have never even heard of CEDAW. I mean, you'd be shocked. I just came back from a meeting of our members in Uganda, our members from Eastern and Southern Africa. They said, CEDAW, women's rights? No clue, no clue. So this is really a divide that has contributed to, again, maintaining this sense that science, technology, agriculture, forestry, this is men's world. And they are very male-dominated sectors. But nonetheless, there are women professionals inside those organizations, many of whom have been, I almost want to say they themselves have been a bit oppressed by the system that really does not encourage and perhaps even allow women in these sectors, professional women, to come forth and say, you know, I want to work with rural women. I demand a budget, I demand project activity. So there's two parallel things going on. In the same way, sometimes when we as scientists talk to the women's empowerment people, there's this sense that, well, you don't belong with us because there's a little bit of a fear or intimidation amongst the women's movement about the field of science and technology. And I'm sorry to say this has been very sort of painful for us to realize, but I think we need to be honest about this and find ways to bridge the gap. I would like to pick up on Taco's, exactly what you're talking about, building accountability. The project that I'm going to describe very briefly to you is institutionalizing gender-responsive research and development in agriculture and natural resource management through women's networks. Again, based on this premise that part of the problem is that our institutions for agriculture and natural resource management themselves are gender blind, very male-dominated in nature, and really not having spaces for women. So we said, in the same way you've got your hospital in Kenya, what about if we make those institutions themselves responsive to the primary farmers in the community, which are female? And as I said yesterday, let's start to deal with this reality that the farmer is a woman. The farmer is not a man in most of the world, but that sense of the farmer being male is so strong in our conceptions and our perceptions. Just that's part of what's holding us back. So, and I think agriculture has been feminized since agriculture probably began. The idea that male out-migration is making feminization of agriculture makes me a little suspect. I think we're just now looking at those data and attributing it to that, but women's work is agriculture in much of the world. So how do we make these male-dominated institutions responsive to the group that should be their primary client, who they just keep ignoring? We've developed a methodology to do this, and we just finished a 3-year project in Bhutan, Nepal, Northeast India, Laos. Those are the countries. Basically what we do, we think that we need champions. You've got the policies, you've got the framework, but if there's nobody to champion the cause and take it personally, it's not going anywhere, and we all know this. So we believe that we need to focus on creating the champions, create the leadership, primarily amongst women, but also with men. So we will take a partner organization who's typically a Department of Agriculture in the country, who's expressed already some interest in this. We don't go in and push it in a place where it's absolutely unwelcome. Usually what they'll say is, we're interested, but we don't know how to do it. And we say, we can help you with that. We create the change agents amongst the staff members themselves, men and women both. We teach them how to look at their own organization, how to do an organization analysis, find out where your organization has gender gaps. what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses in your own organization. So as a member of an organization, you're an insider and you know it very intimately and very well. And we team that person with kind of an outsider who's able to broker. It's difficult when you're inside an institution to push for organizational change because you're not the boss. And you'll feel a lot of pressure about that. But so what we do is the network aspect of it is linking that change agent to outsiders who can help support her or him to bring about the process of change in the organization. That's on the push side. No, let me say the pull side. I'm push and pull, supply and demand. These are the terms of economists that always have to think about. But nevertheless, we've also created within the women's farming groups themselves the abilities to demand services. Don't wait for the Department of Agriculture to come on to you with it all on a silver platter. Women at the community level need to demand, as you were saying, what's rightfully theirs, which is the access to extension, access to new agriculture technologies, etc. And they're intimidated by these institutions, and I fully understand that. So what we're trying to do is create the change agent in the institution becomes the broker between the woman farmer and her or his institution. She tries to make channels of communication. These are both structural spaces as well as processes, as well as changed attitudes amongst the staff that are sort of welcoming. I mean, imagine the hospital in Kenya. If those nurses had had a different attitude, they could have been incredibly helpful and useful. So we're trying to sort of build that sense that women, and particularly women scientists and women of agriculture, have a commitment and responsibility to help the women farmers of their constituency in any way possible. And we've seen this happen. I'll just very briefly say that I'm a forester, and that's even more male-dominated than agriculture. And a friend of mine in Nepal, where I lived for 18 years, started telling me that the Department of Forestry there was becoming positive towards women and started to actually think that women had something to contribute. And I said, no, sorry, that's a fantasy. That's not possible. And sure enough, it in fact was happening. And it was through this approach of going from the grassroots level and teaming those women leaders up with women inside the forest department as well as outside. It was building kind of a sister-to-sister, I want to say, relationship that was actually bringing about a change in the attitude of male foresters. It was a phenomenal case. And based on that, WOCAN developed its own approach, which is very much learning from that case study. I'm sorry I don't have it. We have activities next week for those of you who are still here. We've made a video now about this experience in Nepal. We'll be showing on the 15th next week in the evening at 6:15. And it was a very profound sort of experience that we've learned from. We're now replicating this experience, this approach in Cameroon, Ghana, and probably one country in Eastern Africa yet to be determined. But it's a very interesting approach that we're just getting very, very excited about. So I'll just end there.